Hey there, and welcome to Thousand Ant. I'm Matt Schell, and in this video, I want to talk a little bit about how the kind of business landscape is changing, how that affects indie game developers, and how we can kind of think about what is our job to really do as indie game developers as the world changes around us. Let's get started. All right, so I was watching a talk recently by Chamath Palihapitiya, who is an interesting guy with some kind of spicy opinions and a funny way of expressing them. He runs an investment fund now called Social Capital, and he got his start and made a lot of money at Facebook running the growth team there during their kind of period of explosive growth. He's a very smart guy and has some very interesting kind of contrarian, critical opinions of a lot of what's going on in Silicon Valley, and is obviously speaking from a kind of an insider perspective with a lot of experience and obviously a lot of success. So an interesting guy to listen to. I don't agree with everything that he says, but definitely provocative and thought-provoking. And so one of the things that he was talking about in this talk was that the rise of AWS and how the consensus on that shifted. So in the beginning, at Facebook, they were racking the servers themselves as they were adding capacity and looking at AWS and laughing at them, saying, why would you do that? Who would use that? And then, of course, 7 to 10 years later, if somebody brought a company to him to invest in, he would say, what's wrong with you that you're not using AWS, right? So the consensus completely flipped over that period. And I think we've seen the same thing happen with game engines in the indie game development business, right? Where now, if you're not using a game engine like Unity or Unreal or Godot, people will look at you and be like, why are you building your own engine? And of course there are cases where it makes sense, but the consensus now is don't write your own engine, use an off-the-shelf engine because they have a huge team and they will keep it up to date and they'll fix bugs and you won't have to deal with memory leaks and input problems and audio problems and all the things now that the engine just kind of abstracts away so that you and your team can kind of focus on the core, creative, unique, original content, right? And I think, even outside of game development, this is kind of where it's going. The role of companies is to kind of take all these ingredients from the supermarket of an existing game engine or AWS or these existing technologies, combine them together and then add some special sauce, unique selling point kind of ingredient to do something that hasn't been seen before or combine things in a new way and create something that's hopefully valuable and interesting for people. What we're seeing now is a rise of many more smaller, cheaper, and kind of creatively focused companies, right? Where you don't actually need to have a big server farm. You don't need to have a big core engine tech team. Instead, what you need is a good idea and a good creative execution, right? Or technical execution if you're making some other kind of product. But let's focus on games, right? So now you need a gameplay programmer, technical artist, audio person, game designer, and that's kind of it, right? Of course, you may need other things. But as a kind of a small core indie team, that's probably all you need to get something off the ground because you can take all this off-the-shelf stuff. Now, these are the functions that have been kind of abstracted out, right? The things that we don't need to do anymore. But what I would argue is I think there are some functions now which have come inside of our remit, right? Of the stuff that we're supposed to be doing, and probably marketing or getting attention and traffic is a function that sits more with us than it ever has, right? And I think this is an interesting part of the process of disintermediation, right? In the past, we would try to get our game to a magazine, hope that they cover it. They would put an article in the magazine that would get sent to a subscriber of the magazine physically, and then they would go to a store, find the game on the shelf, buy it, right? There were so many steps and intermediaries, gatekeepers, people taking a percentage of the profits, all of that going on that A, it was a lot less profitable, and B, you didn't have this direct access to the consumer that we have now, right? And we have two forms of direct access to the consumer. One is we have direct access to sell our thing directly, right? We can just send them the link to the Steam page and they can just click it and download it and buy it just right away, right? We could just email people links to the Steam page and never market anything, right? If we had a big enough mailing list, you literally could just make a business doing that, right? Put it on Steam, email people the link, done, right? So we have this direct access to sell the product and deliver it, AKA distribution, right? We have access to distribution in a way that we've never had before. And I remember this from the music business when I was a musician, getting a distributor, so somebody to distribute your physical products. I was selling vinyl records, right? And really, when we first got a distributor, that was what allowed us to start a label, right? Because otherwise we would have had records sitting in our house and had to go sell them hand to hand. Getting a distributor, now you bring them a box of 100 records and they'll ship them to stores. We now all have access to distribution, everybody. No gatekeepers on distribution anymore. And of course, that means that distribution as a channel is no longer a free source of traffic, right? Which is the second point. Traffic now is really our responsibility. And I think not everybody has really gotten that yet. People still think that we're in the times of Indie Game the Movie, 2013 on Steam, where literally just getting a game on the store meant free traffic, right? Because there were a lot of users, a small number of games, just being on the store, you were kind of on the shelf and people would see it and be like, what's that? Nowadays, of course, the shelf is infinite, there's a million billion games, and nobody is just going to just notice it just for it being there. So the role of the store as a traffic provider is reduced. Now, it's important to note with stuff like Steam, there still is a viable play where you just make a good Steam page and get sales through the Steam algorithm, right? But it's not this kind of just golden ticket that it was back in the day, right? Or like in Indie Game the Movie, where we saw Xbox Live Arcade, you just got your game on there, you would get on the front page of Xbox, tons of traffic, sales, millionaire, blah, 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 right? That's over. So now traffic is our responsibility, right? And this is the part where I don't think everybody has caught up quite yet. So one person who talks a lot about this is Gary Vaynerchuk, or Gary V. He's a content creator, marketer that I follow who's from New Jersey. He has a big following. And he talks about how basically all companies now need to become basically media companies, content creators, right? And that even if you're like a roofing company from New Jersey, you need to be on TikTok making videos, right? Now, this is a little bit still counter to the current consensus. It's like a little bit like, what, really? But I actually think he's correct in this, in that we're now in this stage where, because we go direct to consumer, the value of having your own traffic that you're generating, not paying Facebook for ads, not paying Google for ads, right? Generating your own organic traffic that you can convert with your own products and services, like selling a game directly on Steam, is so, so valuable. And so now that function of generating traffic by doing things like what I'm doing here, making YouTube videos, being on TikTok, being on Twitter, Instagram, et cetera, generating attention is now more valuable than ever. And it's especially valuable for people like us who are indie game developers who will have a product to sell. It's a little different if you're a Twitch streamer or a YouTuber who's trying to make money with ads, because what you're doing is you're saying, yeah, I'll give you this ad impression for 0.05 cents or whatever, some tiny fraction, because again, we're going back into a cycle of middlemen. For us, where we can say, go wishlist the game on Steam, well, now we can take that impression and convert it directly into what could be a $10, 10 euro sale. So it's a very different game. And I think that disproportionately means that game dev companies and small indie creators really need to invest effort and resources and team and structure into being content creators and generating their own traffic on whatever platform you want to be on. It could be Reddit, it could be Imgur, it could be TikTok, whatever. But this is now one of your core functions, and it is way more valuable for us to be doing it as people who have a product to sell than it even is for people like Twitch streamers and YouTubers who are going to have to get an ad, and then that goes to the person who's selling the product, and there's this chain of people taking off parts of the value, right? So I think this is a thing that not so many people have recognized. There are a few people doing it really well, right? Pay attention to Danny on YouTube. Jonas Tyroler, who I interviewed on the podcast a while ago, is doing it. It's very smart. Danny has got to, I forget, but like number 10 wish lists on Steam, promoting his game Carlson with his like meme PewDiePie-esque YouTube videos. And he's going to make a ton of money off of that, right? Because he's using his traffic and converting them directly into wish lists, which are going to convert to sales, right? So I think that this is something to just to be aware of, to understand, right? If you're thinking of marketing or content creation as some kind of like, oh yeah, that's something I'll get to when I have time or whatever, like I would encourage you to try to put it more at the center of your plans, because if you're someone who has a product that you can go direct to consumer with, it's really, really valuable. So, here I am doing it too, right? Hopefully this is something that's interesting and valuable for you. If you like this, drop a like on the video. Drop me a comment if this is kind of a yes or a no, like do you agree or am I crazy, am I wrong? Is the future going in a different direction? This is how I see it, and I'm putting my money where my mouth is, but I'd love to hear how you think about it as well. Subscribe if you're not subscribed already, and just as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.